All right, so I've been doing this YouTube thing for a while now and doing the, my draft evaluations for a while now. It's interesting because, I never was, before having this YouTube channel, a draft guy. It wasn't really something I paid much attention to. I don't watch college football. I would usually watch the draft, but just listen to what the analysts had to say about the players, and that was kind of that. But then once, this became my job, maybe 4 years ago or so, I kind of realized, I should probably, pay more attention to this stuff. And I have to say, it's become very fun to do this, and it's something I feel like I've learned a ton since starting this to now. I think I've made a lot of, I think dumb decisions early on in this process that I've since fixed and don't make those dumb decisions anymore. I think a lot of positions I really struggled at when I first started and now kind of have the hang of, and maybe we'll make the occasional dumb decision or dumb take, but, for the most part, kind of have it down. And then there's wide receivers, which I just can't seem to figure out. And I wanted to make a video talking about this really kind of to, for one thing, I think it's good to acknowledge my mistakes in a public forum and kind of say, hey, this is what I'm not so good at. Maybe don't take my opinions on this too seriously. But also I thought it'd be good to kind of challenge myself to come up with potential explanations for why I struggle so much and come up with fixes as to how I can maybe, not make the same mistakes I've made in the past. So let's first talk about some of my previous lists, which are just going to say this, straight up embarrassing. So this was from 3 seasons ago. I have 3 of these lists, and I, on the podcast, just to save time, we usually throw in tight ends and receivers together. So that's why you're going to see tight ends and wide receivers here on the same list. And there's some okay, that's a miss. Like Terrace Marshall, having him at 5, he ended up not working out. That's a miss, but a lot of people were high on Marshall. I was probably a little bit higher than most, but that's not a horrible, oh my God, what was I thinking mess. What is a horrible, oh my God, what was I thinking miss is number 1 wide receiver, Kadarius Toney, who I was all about. I even was a little lower on Jamar Chase, too. It wasn't even one of those situations where I could, some people would say, oh, no, you weren't low on Jamar Chase. You were just high on Kadarius Toney. No, it was both. It was the worst case outcome in both scenarios. I think, looking back on it, I definitely fell in love with Toney's highlights. I think I fell in love with the good he would bring, not kind of paying attention to the fact that it was very inconsistent. And even in the NFL, we have seen him show flashes of the, of the greatness that you would see. I could sit here and say that, oh, well, for me, I could easily kind of swing it and say, he was more of a head case. It was more of him just, the mental side of things. I can't interview the guys. I could say that if I want to, but that's not really fair. It just isn't, because I think even when he's been at his best, it still hasn't been what Jalen Waddle or Jamar Chase have been. And Jamar Chase, I think my issues with him were, coming out of college, I thought that some of his moves just wouldn't work in the NFL level. It was kind of okay, it's always working in college, but once you get kind of bigger defensive backs, is it going to work? Will these contested catch plays work when you're not a huge guy? So will that be an issue? Answer no. It did not be an issue. So those were kind of my 2 huge blunders there. Some other smaller mistakes that I probably want to go back and fix, but those were the 2 big ones. And even Kyle Pitts, which, let's be honest, basically everyone had him as their number 1 pass catcher. At the same time, though, he hasn't been as good as Jalen Waddle or Jamar Chase, right? So, he's been solid. He's certainly, I would say, number 3. You could argue maybe even not even number 3 on this list. Could Devonta Smith be better? An argument could be made. So, definitely, a lot of misses here. But, okay, that was kind of not my first year doing this, but my first, real year really putting in a lot of effort. So, okay, one bad list. Who doesn't have a bad list at some point? Let's move on. So these were my top 10. I don't remember if I separated tight ends or not on this list. They're all wide receivers here. This one is not terrible. This one is not as embarrassing as the last one, for sure. Now, again, Jameson Williams has definitely not been the most valuable pass catcher, here. I think definitely, Garrett Wilson, certainly, Drake London have both been better. I also think it's fair to say, I was too low on Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, though, right? Garrett Wilson, I was much too low on. I had him at 5. He should have been much higher than that. He's been great. So, again, this is not a list without its faults. Alec Pierce, I was too high on. I liked him, maybe liked him a bit too much. George Pickens, that was a good take by me. He was not considered a first-round talent. I had a first-round grade on him. So, a solid take there. Even like John Mechie, I'm interested in seeing what he can do. He's had his career kind of derailed due to no fault of his own. But interesting with him, I suppose. But yeah, I was high on Drake London. Yes, Jameson Williams maybe, hasn't lived up to that hype, but he's also had, the suspension and the injury. So you could make that excuse if you want to. And even still, like, a lot of people had him as the consensus number one. So, it's not a horrible take. But still, I would still look at this list and say I didn't do as good of a job as I could have, certainly. And then last year, again, some quality takes here. Josh Downs and Tank Dell both making my list. That's good. Jordan Addison at 6. That's a bit low. Okay, maybe could have been a bit higher. Michael Mayer will remains to be seen at the tight end position. Dalton Kincaid at number 2. That's a great take. He's been great. Well done by me. Zay Flowers at 4. Okay, a bit low, but that's fine. It's going to be hard to get it exactly right. Jackson Smith and Jigba at 3, okay, a bit high, but again, kind of hard to get it exactly right. Number 1, of course, Quentin Johnston, who, and it's funny because everyone, I remember there was a NFL Reddit page, where an NFL subreddit page that said, like, who's going to be the bust out of this draft, and like everyone was saying Quentin Johnston, and I was like, oh, you fools, you don't know what you're talking about. Quentin Johnston is going to be a star. Again, I kind of fell in love with his route running. It's one of those weird things where, we can say, I guess my question is, do I suck at evaluating, or do I put the wrong emphasis on wrong things? And I think it's the latter. I mean, I felt the same way about Quentin Johnston everyone else felt. I just thought that the negatives weren't as big of a deal as what other people thought they were, and I thought the positives were a much bigger deal than people were giving him credit for. So that's kind of the question I personally, have to ask myself is this a poor evaluation thing, or is this I put the value on the wrong side of thing? Because clearly this is a terrible job by me, and everyone watching this video is probably saying, wow, this guy's a moron, right? So what's the fix? How do I get better at this? And I think I've come up with a conclusion. I think I pay too much attention to upside when it comes to wide receivers. Wide receivers, I should mention in general, are a very hard position to predict. You look at the history of trying to figure out which wide receivers are going to succeed and which aren't. A lot of good wide receivers get drafted in rounds 2 and 3 compared to other positions. Granted, my lists are still a lot worse than the average list, so I can't fully use that excuse. But I think because I knew that, it was almost emboldening me to kind of try to go for upside a bit too much. Like someone like Tony, like I said, his ceiling was the number 1 receiver in that draft class. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but the most likely outcome was nowhere close to number 1, and I should have recognized that. I think that's kind of the main thing I'm going to focus on more, is really try to pay more attention to just how often are you winning? Are you able to win consistently? Like someone like, again, it's weird because like I feel like I view Quentin Johnston similar to Drake London these are guys who maybe have some faults, but Drake London also had the great contested catch ability that maybe I didn't focus on, and I used to kind of be too anti-contested catch guys. Maybe I need to pay more attention to that. I think at the end of the day, I kind of always viewed it as, well, what are the moves that can work at the NFL level? That's what I was focused on with wide receivers, where now I don't think that's actually the best way to view it. I think the best way to do it is, what were the moves that you were doing that worked the most consistently, and then do I think they will work at the NFL level? I think that's a better way to view it, and I think doing that will hopefully help me get some, better evaluations on the table. I also think it's fair to say that, like, it's possible I just had a few bad takes. Like, it's possible that's the case as well, and if I continue evaluating how I've been evaluating, it will just eventually get better over time. I don't think that's the case, though, because I think there's enough bad takes here. I think I should pay more attention to consistency as opposed to upside. So that's what I'm going to try and do in the future, and we'll see how well it works out. Hope you're still interested in hearing my opinions, because, again, I would say my evaluations of these players have been pretty spot on in terms of like how I think I don't really disagree with a lot of what other people think about these players. I think I just put my value in the wrong aspects of it, is what I would say. So that's at least how I view it, and we'll see how well it goes in the future. But yeah, that's what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.